The galaxy was vast, full of countless civilizations, but few were as feared as the Seraph Empire. For centuries, their starships had swept across systems, conquering planets and demanding loyalty. Their queen, Zarala, was a towering figure both in body and in reputation. She was known for her sharp mind, her commanding presence, and her unshakable rule. Entire races bent before her, and no one dared to speak against her throne. Yet now, strange rumors spread across the stars. The queen of the Sarath had agreed to marry a human. Among the Sarath, humans were considered weak and soft, a species still young compared to the old empires of the galaxy. They had courage, yes, but lacked the sharp claws, the armor-like skin, or the advanced strength of other species. To many, the very idea of a human standing beside their queen seemed laughable. But the Seraph Empire was tired of constant wars, and so were the humans. To prevent open conflict, a political marriage had been arranged. The chosen groom was Elias Grant, son of Ambassador Marcus Grant, who had long represented Earth in interstellar negotiations. Elias was no soldier, no general, no warlord. He was a man with calm brown eyes, a steady posture, and a quiet confidence that did not easily reveal itself. When he arrived at the Seraph capital world, the atmosphere was thick with hostility. The great halls of the Seraph Palace glittered with black stone and shining crystal, their walls towering like mountains. Seraph nobles gathered, their sharp eyes fixed on the human walking into their midst. Their voices whispered like cold wind. "Too fragile," one muttered. "He will not last a month," another scoffed. "A human as consort? An insult to our queen?" Elias heard their words, though they thought he could not. He did not answer, nor did he let his expression change. His steps were steady, his hands calm at his sides. He moved as though he carried no fear, though the truth was that even he felt the weight of so many eyes upon him. At the far end of the hall sat Queen Zarala upon her throne. Her presence filled the chamber. She was tall, with skin like polished obsidian, and eyes that glowed faintly with violet fire. Her crown shimmered with crystalline light, and her armor-like robes spoke of both elegance and strength. She looked down at Elias with cool interest, like a predator examining an unusual creature. "So," she said, her voice carrying across the hall like rolling thunder, "this is the human chosen to stand beside me." Her words made the nobles laugh quietly, but Elias only bowed respectfully. "I am Elias Grant," he said, his voice steady, "and I come not only as a representative of Earth, but as a man ready to honor this bond." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly. She expected nervous stammering, perhaps fear. Instead, she found calmness. This human spoke without arrogance, but also without trembling. It was unusual. The first days in the palace were not easy. Elias walked through halls where every glance was sharp with doubt. Servants avoided speaking to him, and warriors sized him up as though deciding how quickly he could be crushed. At meals, nobles laughed at his human ways, his smaller frame, his softer voice, his lack of the physical strength that Seraph admired above all. But Elias did not fight their scorn with anger. He answered their mocking words with polite replies, sometimes with a sharp wit that made even a few Sarath pause in surprise. When they tried to provoke him, he let their words pass by like wind. His composure unsettled them, though they would not admit it. Queen Zarala watched from a distance. She told herself it was only curiosity, but in truth she found herself observing him more closely than she expected. She noticed how he walked the halls with quiet focus, how he studied the architecture, the guards, the patterns of the palace routines. His eyes missed nothing, though he never spoke of it. He was not loud, nor did he try to prove himself with displays of strength. Instead, he carried himself with the patience of someone who knew when to wait. One evening, during a feast in the Grand Hall, a Seraph warrior rose from his seat. He was massive, his arms thick with muscle, his voice booming. "Human," he called, pointing at Elias. "If you are to stand beside our queen, prove yourself. Show us that you are not made of paper and air." The hall roared with laughter. All eyes turned to Elias. He stood slowly, placing his cup down without haste. I am not here to fight, Elias said simply. This union is not about strength of arms, but strength of will. The warrior sneered. Empty words? You hide behind them because you fear our power. For a moment, Elias was silent. Then he gave a small smile. If strength is all that matters to you, then you will never understand why I am here. The words spread like ripples through the hall. Some laughed again, but others frowned. It was bold to speak so calmly in the face of a warrior's challenge. Queen Zirala's lips curved ever so slightly, though she quickly hid it. Later that night, when the feast ended and Elias returned to his quarters, he allowed himself a long breath. He knew the dangers that surrounded him. Every noble wanted to see him fail, to prove that humans were not worthy allies. But Elias had not come unprepared. He had been raised not only as a diplomat's son, but also as a thinker, a strategist, a man taught to see more than what was shown. The palace was not only a place of grandeur, it was also a battlefield of whispers and schemes. Elias could already sense the tension beneath the surface. Some nobles respected their queen, but others wanted power for themselves. A human groom was the perfect excuse for rebellion, should they choose to strike. As he looked out of his window at the alien stars above, Elias knew one truth. He was not just here to marry a queen. He was here to protect something far greater, the fragile peace between two civilizations, and though the Seraph saw only weakness in him, he carried within himself a strength they did not yet understand, far across the palace. Queen Zirala stood on her balcony, her eyes fixed on the same stars. She thought of the human groom, his calm gaze, and his unshaken words. She had expected a trembling boy. Instead, she found a man who looked at her throne with neither fear nor arrogance. She folded her hands behind her back, her thoughts sharp. Strange human, she whispered. What are you hiding? The galaxy waited for the answer. The days passed slowly in the Sarath Palace. Elias Grant continued to walk the halls with his usual calm face, but inside he felt the weight of every glance. The Sarath nobles watched him like hawks, their eyes sharp with doubt. To them, he was still just a fragile human, a man far weaker than the towering warriors who filled the queen's court. At first, the servants avoided him. They bowed quickly and left, unsure if speaking to the queen's strange new consort was allowed. But Elias always greeted them politely. He thanked them when they brought him food. He spoke gently when they guided him through the palace. Slowly, the servants began to whisper that the human was different from the nobles, who often treated them as invisible. Even Queen Zirala noticed this change. When she passed through the halls, she saw how Elias would pause to speak to those below his station, how he listened instead of commanded. It was unusual. The Sarath believed power flowed downward. A ruler gave orders, and the lesser obeyed. But this human, he treated even the lowest servant as though their voice mattered. Zirala told herself it was weakness, not strength. Yet part of her was unsettled by it. One evening, the great feast hall filled with nobles and warriors. The black crystal walls glowed with alien firelight, and long tables overflowed with food from 100 worlds. The Sarath laughed loudly, their deep voices echoing. Elias sat at the queen's side, his posture straight, his eyes steady. He ate little, instead watching the gathering with quiet attention. The nobles whispered, "Look at him. So small beside her, he has no claws, no scales, no strength. A child trying to play at power." Their voices carried just enough for Elias to hear. He did not react. Instead, he set down his cup and looked across the room calmly. His silence only made the nobles restless. Finally, a warrior rose. He was enormous, even for a Sarath, with shoulders broad as stone and arms marked by scars of many battles. His name was General Vaynor, one of the queen's fiercest champions. His voice boomed like thunder. "Human," he shouted, his finger pointing directly at Elias. "We have heard enough of your quiet sitting. If you are to be our queen's consort, prove you are not made of dust and bone. Show us your strength." The hall erupted in cheers. The nobles banged their cups against the tables, demanding a test. Elias rose slowly. His calm eyes met the general's burning ones. "I was not brought here to fight," Elias said in a steady voice. "This union is meant to bring peace, not contests of violence. The warriors laughed, their teeth sharp. General Vaynor sneered, "Peace without strength is an illusion. If you cannot even lift a blade, then what are you but a chain to drag our queen down?" For a moment, silence filled the room. All eyes turned to Queen Zarala, waiting to see what she would say. She sat back in her throne, her violet eyes glowing faintly. Her expression was unreadable. "Let him speak for himself," she said. "If the human believes he has strength, let us see it." The challenge was set. The warriors cleared space in the hall. A circle formed, torches burning high along the walls. General Vaynor stepped into the ring, his chest bare, his muscles rippling with power. He raised a heavy staff, carved from dark iron, the traditional weapon of trial. Elias entered slowly, unarmed. His steps were light, his face calm. He bowed respectfully to the queen, then turned to face the general. "You think me weak?" Elias said. "Perhaps by your measure, I am. But strength is not only in muscle," the general laughed. "Words are useless. Defend yourself." With a roar, Vaynor swung the staff downward. The floor shook as it struck, but Elias was no longer standing where he had been. He had moved quickly, faster than the eye expected. The blow smashed only empty air. Gasps echoed through the hall. Elias did not strike back. Instead, he circled lightly, his eyes fixed on every motion of the general's arms. Again the staff swung, this time from the side. Elias ducked beneath it, his movements smooth, almost graceful. The general grew angry, his strikes faster, harder. Yet each time, Elias stepped aside, dodged, or leaned away just in time. The nobles shouted in surprise. They had expected the human to fall in a single blow. Instead, he was still standing, untouched. Finally, Elias moved. As the staff came down once more, he stepped in close, his hands snapping out. With quick precision, he pressed against the general's wrist. The weapon clattered to the floor. Before Vaynor could react, Elias shifted his weight, turning the general's own momentum against him. With a crash, the towering warrior stumbled forward. Landing on his knees, the hall went silent. Elias stepped back, breathing calmly. He had not struck a single blow. He had not needed to. His speed, his timing, and his patience had done what brute force could not. "I did not come here to humiliate anyone," Elias said, his voice steady. "But strength can be more than breaking bones. Strength is control. It is knowing when to strike and when not to." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Some were angry, some astonished, and some uncertain. Queen Zarala leaned forward slightly on her throne. Her violet eyes studied him with new intensity. She had expected him to fall. Instead, he had stood, and more than that, he had revealed something she had not imagined: hidden skill. The feast ended with restless energy. The nobles left in small groups, their voices buzzing with rumors. Elias returned to his chambers, his mind calm but his body weary. He knew what he had done tonight would not silence their doubts. If anything, it had made them louder. The nobles would wonder what other secrets he carried, and some might see him as a threat. But as Elias looked into the mirror, he allowed himself a small smile. He had shown enough to keep them guessing, but not so much as to reveal everything. His true strength still remained hidden, waiting for the right moment. Far across the palace, Queen Zarala stood in her private chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. Her thoughts were sharp and restless. "This human is no ordinary man," she whispered to herself. "He walks like a diplomat, but fights like a trained warrior. What game is he playing?" For the first time in many years, the Queen of the Seraph felt something unusual, a sense of curiosity mixed with unease. And as the stars outside the palace burned quietly, whispers spread through the court. The human had survived the challenge. The human had bested a general. Without striking a blow, the question now echoed through the halls of power: what strength does the human truly hide? The Seraph Palace was never truly silent. Even in the deepest hours of night, when the great torches burned low, whispers drifted through the vast halls. Servants moved in careful steps, Guards stood at their posts, and nobles lingered in shadowed corridors, plotting and murmuring, since the trial with General Vayner. Elias Grant had become the center of those whispers. Some said the human had cheated, others claimed he was lucky. But more than a few began to wonder if there was more to him than they had thought. The way he had stood calmly, the way he had moved with precision, it unsettled them. Queen Zarala, too, found herself thinking about it more often than she liked to admit. She replayed the sight of him stepping past Vayner's heavy blows. His movements quick, yet controlled, his eyes sharp with focus. There had been no fear in him, only patience. For a species the Sereth believed weak, Elias had shown something different, something hidden, but the nobles were not satisfied. Many of them whispered in dark corners, asking why their queen should bind herself to such a strange match. Some plotted to use his presence as proof that the queen's rule was weakening. Zarala knew it, and she was ready to crush them if they dared. Still, she watched Elias more closely now. One morning, Elias walked through the outer gardens of the palace. The Sereth gardens were not like those on Earth. Instead of soft green grass, there were sharp red vines that grew in tangled webs, glowing crystals sprouted from the soil, and tall black trees with violet leaves swayed against a dark sky. Too many humans, the sight would have been frightening. But Elias studied it with quiet interest. As he walked, he noticed a group of servants struggling to carry heavy crystal jars. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to help. The servants froze in shock. No noble, no warrior, and certainly no royal consort had ever offered to help them before. Elias lifted one jar carefully and carried it beside them. His hands trembled slightly from the weight, but he did not falter. "Thank you, Lord," one servant whispered in disbelief. "I am no lord," Elias replied simply. "Only a man who can lend a hand, seen by him." Queen Zarala stood on a balcony above the garden, watching. Her sharp eyes caught every detail, the way the servants' faces changed, the way Elias treated them as equals. For the first time in years, Zarala felt something unusual stir within her. Respect. But peace never lasted long in the palace. That night, during a gathering in the central hall, shadows moved where they should not have. The queen's advisors stood by her side. Nobles filled the room with their usual sharp laughter, and Elias sat quietly near the throne. Suddenly, the torches flickered, and a strange hum filled the air. From the upper arches, masked figures dropped into the hall. Their weapons glowed with red energy, and their voices shouted in unison, "For freedom from the throne, assassins!" The hall erupted in chaos. Guards rushed to protect the queen, nobles screamed in fear, and warriors drew their blades. The attackers struck with deadly speed, their blades cutting through the air like fire. Elias rose at once. His calm mask broke for the first time, revealing eyes full of sharp fire. When one assassin lunged toward him, expecting an easy kill, Elias moved with startling speed. He caught the attacker's wrist, twisted, and disarmed him in a single motion. The blade clattered to the ground. Gasps filled the room. The human was fighting. Another assassin charged, and Elias stepped aside, his movements smooth as water. His elbow struck the attacker's side, sending him sprawling. He turned quickly, placing himself between the queen and the advancing assassins. His calm voice carried across the chaos. "Stay behind me, Your Majesty." Queen Zarala's eyes widened. No one had ever dared to speak such words to her. She was a queen, a warrior in her own right, feared across the galaxy. Yet in that moment, she found herself obeying. She stood just behind him, watching as Elias fought with a strength and skill none had expected. He did not fight like a wild beast. He fought with precision. Every strike he made was measured, every movement calculated. He disarmed rather than killed, but each disarm left his enemies broken and unable to rise again. He moved with the discipline of a trained soldier, not the clumsiness of a diplomat's son. The court was frozen in shock. The human Groom, whom they had mocked as weak, was holding back assassins that even Sereth guards struggled to face. Finally, the queen herself stepped forward, her violet energy blade flashing into her hand. She cut down 2 attackers in swift strikes. But even as she fought, Her eyes kept flicking to Elias. She saw the way his body flowed with every movement. It's the way his focus never wavered. He was not simply surviving, he was protecting. The battle ended quickly once the guards regained order. The assassins who survived fled into the shadows, leaving the hall in ruin. Blood stained the crystal floor. The nobles cowered in silence. Elias stood breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling. His clothes were torn, but his eyes were sharp. He turned toward the queen. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Zerala stared at him, stunned. No one in her empire spoke to her this way. She was always the one asking others, commanding them, judging them. Yet here stood a human, his body trembling from battle, asking only if she was safe. "I am unhurt," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. The hall remained silent. Nobles stared at Elias with wide eyes, unable to reconcile the image before them with the weak human they had mocked. Later, when the hall was cleared and the dead taken away, Queen Zarella called Elias to her private chamber. The firelight cast sharp shadows across the room, and her eyes glowed faintly violet as she faced him. "You fight like no diplomat, son," she said, her voice low. "What are you hiding?" Elias stood calmly, though his body still ached from the battle. "I hide nothing, Your Majesty. I was trained to protect." "Nothing more? Trained by whom?" she pressed. He hesitated, then bowed his head slightly. "By those who believed peace cannot exist without strength." Her sharp gaze studied him. He revealed little, yet she could see truth in his words. She had ruled for years, and she could sense lies easily. This man spoke honestly, but not fully. He still carried secrets. For the first time in her reign, Zarella found herself uncertain. This human had just saved her life in front of her court. He had shown skill and strength that none had expected, and yet he spoke with no arrogance, no demand for reward. That night, the queen stood again on her balcony, her thoughts heavy. The stars stretched endlessly above, cold and distant. She whispered into the night, "This human, Elias Grant, he is more than he appears. He carries strength not in muscle alone, but in spirit. If the nobles fear him now, perhaps they are right to do so." Below in his chamber, Elias sat in silence. His hands trembled slightly from the memory of battle, but his eyes remained calm. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. The nobles would see him as a threat now. Some would plot harder than before to see him removed, but he also knew something else. Tonight, for the first time, the queen had seen a glimpse of his true self. She had seen his hidden strength, and though the future remained uncertain, Elias was ready. Because strength, he knew, was not only about power. It was about standing firm when others doubted, about protecting even those who thought you weak. And in that, he would never falter. The attack in the Grand Hall had shaken the Sareth Palace. Though the assassins were defeated, the whispers only grew louder in the days that followed. Nobles gathered in secret chambers, voices sharp with anger and suspicion. Some claimed the human Groom was the true cause of the unrest. Others argued that Queen Zarella had lost her grip on power by letting him stay. The queen knew the truth. The assassins had not come for Elias. They had come for her. The rebellion was growing stronger in the shadows, and her throne was under threat. Yet she also knew something else without Elias. She might have fallen that night. Zarella walked through the palace halls with her usual proud stride, but her mind turned again and again to the human. His speed, his calmness, his hidden skill, all unsettled her. He was not the weak figure she had expected. He carried secrets, but also a strength that even her generals had underestimated. Elias, for his part, did not boast of what he had done. He moved through the palace quietly, as he always had, speaking politely to servants and studying the movements of the court. But now, eyes followed him wherever he went. Some were filled with suspicion, some with fear, and a few with respect. One evening, Zarella summoned him to her war chamber. The chamber was carved from black stone, its walls lined with star maps and glowing strategy tables. Generals and advisors stood in a circle, their expressions grim. "The rebellion grows," one general said. The warlords gather ships in the outer systems. They believe your bond with the human has weakened you, my queen, another growled. They will strike soon. Their claws are sharp, and they will not wait. Zirella's eyes glowed faintly violet as she turned toward Elias. And what does the human think? She asked. The generals bristled. He has no place in this chamber. One shouted. This is a matter of Sereth's strength, not human weakness. But Elias did not flinch. He stepped forward, his gaze steady. Strength without thought is destruction, he said calmly. If you rush into war without strategy, you will lose more than honor. You will lose your throne. The room fell silent. Even the generals froze at the boldness of his words. Only Zirala watched him closely, her expression unreadable. Speak, she commanded. Elias nodded. He moved to the glowing table and studied the star maps. His hand hovered over the shifting lights of planets and fleets. The warlords want you to meet them head-on. They expect you to send your armies in a show of power. But that is exactly what they are waiting for. If you fight them in open battle, they will bleed your forces dry. And what do you suggest? One general asked bitterly. Use their pride against them, Elias replied. Strike not where they are strong, but where they are blind. Cut off their supplies. Turn their allies uncertain. Make them doubt their own strength before you ever face them in battle. Then, when they are weak, strike swiftly and end the rebellion before it spreads. The chamber was silent again. The generals exchanged uneasy looks. They were warriors, not planners. They understood the blade, not patience. Yet what the humans said made sense. Queen Zirala leaned back slightly in her seat, her sharp gaze never leaving Elias. She saw not just a man, but a strategist. His calm words carried the weight of experience. This was no diplomat's child who had stumbled into her court. This was someone trained to think like a soldier. That night, after the council ended, Zirala called Elias aside. Her voice was low but firm. You speak like one who has seen battle. Who are you truly? Elias met her gaze without fear. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he answered, I was trained by the Terran Vanguard, he admitted. Earth's hidden guardians. My father sent me here as a diplomat's son, but I was also prepared as a protector. I was never meant to be only a groom. I was meant to be both shield and bridge. Zirella's eyes narrowed. The Terran Vanguard was a name spoken rarely, even in Sereth halls. Rumors said they were humanity's finest defenders, trained in both war and strategy, ready to stand where no one else could. You hide much, she said slowly. And yet you've protected me, even when you could have stayed in the shadows. Why? Elias bowed his head slightly. Because strength means nothing if it is not used to protect. And because I gave my word to honor this union, for the first time in many years the Queen of the Serath did not know how to respond. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she could not ignore. The days that followed were filled with preparation. The rebellion grew louder, and reports came of warlord fleets gathering at the edge of Sereth's space. Zirella moved her forces carefully, following the strategies Elias had suggested. Small strikes weakened the rebels' supply lines. Loyal fleets appeared suddenly where they were least expected. Whispers of doubt spread among the warlords. But soon, the warlords moved openly. Their fleets cut across space like blades, and one of their strongest commanders led an assault on a border world. Zirella gathered her forces for battle. The royal fleet was vast, its ships black and sharp, glowing with violet light. Elias stood beside her on the command deck, his eyes fixed on the stars. You do not fear? She asked him. I fear, Elias admitted. But fear is not weakness. It is a reminder to act with care. The battle began. The rebel fleets poured in with fire and fury, their weapons striking hard. The Sereth ships met them head-on, but not as expected. Following Elias's plan, they did not waste their strength in direct clashes. Instead, they moved swiftly, striking the weakest points, cutting through supply vessels, splitting the enemy apart. The warlords raged, their pride blinding them. They sent their strongest ships forward, only to find themselves surrounded. Their lines broken, Elias moved across the command deck with sharp focus, his calm voice offering suggestions, his eyes catching details even the generals missed. Zarella watched him, her respect growing with every passing moment. He was not there to take her throne nor to steal her command. He was there to stand beside her, not above, not below. At last the battle turned. The rebels, scattered and broken, fled into the dark. The Sarath fleet held strong, their queen unshaken. When the victory was announced, the nobles bowed to Zarella, but their eyes also flicked toward Elias. They no longer saw only a weak human. They saw someone who had helped save the throne. That night, in the quiet of the palace, Zarella spoke to Elias again. Her voice was low, almost thoughtful. "You have revealed much," she said. "You are not only a groom. You are a warrior, a strategist. You stood beside me in battle when even some of my own doubted me." Elias bowed his head. "I did only what I could, nothing more." But Zarella felt the truth in her chest. He had done far more than that. He had proven himself not with muscle, but with mind, loyalty, and courage. For the first time, the Queen of the Sarath began to see him not as a burden or a political pawn, but as something far greater, an ally, a partner. Yet even as she felt this, she knew the war was not over. The rebels would rise again, stronger, more desperate. And when they did, the true trial would come. The trial of shadows had only begun. The palace of the Sarath stood strong after the victory, yet shadows still moved in the deep corners of space. The rebellion had been struck, but it was not destroyed. Whispers of betrayal spread through the noble houses. Some claimed the queen was too close to her human groom. Others believed Elias himself was a spy. Placed to weaken the Sarath throne from within, Zarella listened to these whispers, but her heart had changed. Once she had seen Elias as nothing more than a quiet groom, a political piece in a game of power. But now, after he had saved her life, after he had helped win a battle many thought unwinnable, she saw him as something far greater, and yet doubt remained among her people. If the Sarath were to remain united, both she and Elias would need to prove themselves in a way no one could question. One night, stars glowed beyond the high windows. Zarella summoned Elias to her private hall. The great chamber was quiet, lit only by violet fire burning in tall iron bowls. "The rebellion gathers its full strength," she said. Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed a rare weariness. "Their leader has revealed himself. Lord Kelthor, once my ally, now my greatest rival. He has united the warlords. Their fleet is vast. They will strike at the heart of the empire." Elias nodded. He had studied Kelthor's movements for weeks. The man was cunning, proud, and ruthless. He would not stop until Zarella's throne was his. "What will you do?" Elias asked quietly. Zarella's gaze was sharp as steel. "I will fight him. But this is no battle I can win with ships alone. I must face him in the trial of sovereigns." Elias frowned slightly. "Trial of sovereigns." "It is an ancient law of the Sarath," Zarella explained. "When a throne is challenged, the queen may call the rival to single combat. Not a fight of blades, but of spirit, strength, and will. Whoever stands at the end commands loyalty. Whoever falls loses all claim." Elias studied her for a long moment. "And Kelthor accepted?" "He has already sent his answer," she said bitterly. "He welcomes it. He believes I will fall before him. He believes I am weak." "He is wrong," Elias said firmly. Zarella's eyes softened just slightly at his words, but her tone remained cold. "Still, there is danger. If I lose, my empire burns. If I win, the Sarath will survive, but Kelthor will not fight alone. He will bring tricks, shadows, and lies. That is his way." She turned to Elias. "That is why I need you." Elias bowed his head. "Then I will stand with you, always." The day of the trial arrived. The arena of the sovereigns was no ordinary place. It was a colossal chamber carved into a dead moon, older than the Sarath Empire itself. The walls glowed faintly with ancient light, and the ground pulsed with energy. Here, rulers had fought for power for centuries. Under the silent gaze of the stars, nobles from across the empire filled the stands. The rebellion's envoys sat on one side, their faces twisted with pride and greed. The loyal houses sat on the other, anxious but hopeful. At the center stood two figures, Queen Zarala, tall and proud, her violet crown glowing faintly, and Lord Kelthar, massive and cruel, his armor jagged like broken stone. Between them, standing quietly, was Elias. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "The human is here?" Some whispered, "Why does the queen bring him?" Kelthar laughed when he saw Elias. His voice boomed across the arena. "So, Zarala, you bring your groom to watch your fall? Do you think this weak creature will save you when you stumble?" Zarala did not answer. Her eyes burned with focus. The trial began. At first it was a contest of strength. Kelthar struck with fury, his blows shaking the ground. Zarala met him strike for strike, her movement sharp, her will unbending. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed. Elias watched closely. He could see what the nobles could not. Every time Kelthar swung, there was a rhythm, a pattern. Every strike was fueled by pride, not by wisdom. Then came the trial of spirit. The arena filled with illusions crafted from the moon's ancient energy. Shadows of fear, of doubt, of weakness rose around them. Kelthar laughed and charged through them, breaking illusions with brute force. But Zarala struggled. The shadows whispered her failures, her loneliness, her doubts about her throne. For a moment, her steps faltered. Elias stepped forward, his voice cutting through the whispers. "You are not alone," he called. "You are more than a crown. You are strength itself, and I stand with you." Zarela's eyes locked on him. For the first time, a spark of warmth entered her heart. She straightened, her will blazing, and the shadows shattered around her. The final stage began, the trial of will. No weapons, no illusions. Only two rulers locked in pure force of will. They stepped closer, their energy clashing like storms. Kelthar's roar shook the air, but Zarela's silence was stronger. She pushed back with everything she had, her pride, her loyalty to her people, her growing bond with Elias. For a long moment it seemed the two were equals. But then Kelthar's pride betrayed him. He pushed harder, desperate to crush her. In his fury, he lost control. His strength scattered, wild and unfocused. Zarala stood firm. Her will was clear, sharp as a blade. With one final surge, she broke through Kelthar's defenses. He fell to his knees, his roar turning to silence. The arena shook. The nobles rose to their feet. The trial was over. Zarala stood victorious. The empire erupted in celebration. The rebellion, broken by Kelthar's defeat, crumbled swiftly. Fleets that had once sworn loyalty to him now bent their heads to the queen. The nobles who had whispered against her now fell silent, their doubts burned away by her victory. Yet in the palace, Zarela's thoughts returned again and again to Elias. Without him, she might have fallen in the shadows. Without him, her will might have wavered. One evening, after the celebrations faded, she called him to the highest tower of the palace. The stars stretched endless above them, cold and bright. "You stood with me?" she said softly. "Even when others doubted. Even when the shadows tried to break me." Elias bowed slightly. "I only did what I promised. To honor you, to protect you." Zarela studied him in silence. At last she spoke, her voice steady but gentler than he had ever heard before. "You were brought here as a groom, but you have become far more. You are not only my ally, you are my equal." Elias met her gaze. "Then let me stand as such. Not only by your side in battle, but in all things." For the first time, the queen of the Sereth smile, not the sharp smile of a ruler, but the true smile of someone who had found trust at last. The stars bore witness as two different worlds. Once divided by doubt, now stood together. From that day forward, the Sereth Empire grew stronger than ever. Queen Zarala ruled with wisdom and power, and Elias walked beside her not as a shadow, not as a burden, but as a partner. His hidden strength had been revealed, not only in battle, but in loyalty, courage, and heart. And though many stories would be told of the war, of the trial, and of the fall of Kelthar, one truth echoed across the stars. The alien queen had been stunned, not because her groom was strong, but because he had taught her that strength shared was greater than strength alone.